Hey, Sully, how are you this morning?
Pretty good, man. What's the Diet Coke meter at? 2.5?
We're pretty good. You know, I stumbled upon a new a Diet Coke with a little bit of a vanilla tinge at the Wawa fountain machine, so I'm pretty excited about that. So I rocked one of those this morning, and we're ready to go.
Nice. So I guess you were out at St. Augustine last night, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a fantastic, football game out there, and a fantastic, fourth quarter between two great teams, two great programs.
Were you surprised at that kind of back? I guess not too surprised at that kind of back and forth. I mean, these are two of the best squads in South Jersey, so you had to figure it was going to be a game that came down to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I expected it to be a close game. I think I picked in the preview video that we do each week on PressOfAC.com. I picked Millville to win a close game, which I got right. For once, but really just an outstanding game between two programs. And what really impressed me about the game was both teams really showed a lot of grit and determination. Millville goes up 19-10 early in that fourth quarter. It looks like they're in charge. St. Augustine comes back. Quarterback Chris Allen makes some plays. Shamir Collins, their wide receiver, defensive back, who is from Millville, just played a fantastic game. St. Augustine gets 2 touchdowns. Freshman Patrick Smith scores with about 4 minutes, 38 seconds left to give Millville, I believe it was, or to give St. Augustine a 4-point lead. And then Millville just overcomes some adversity. In the fourth quarter, they blew a 9-point lead. They snapped the ball over their punter's head to set up a St. Augustine touchdown. And they had a 99-yard kickoff return negated by a clipping penalty.
Wow. And
all that happened in the fourth quarter to Millville, and they still were able to come back and drive 92 yards in the final 4 minutes. And, of course, E.J. Nichols finds Clayton Scott open over the middle on a route that Clayton Scott suggested to Coach Dennis Thomas. And Millville pulls out a 25-23 win, ending St. Augustine's 27-game winning streak against South Jersey teams.
What did he pick out a route he saw on Madden or something? What's going on there?
Well, he went over to the to Coach Thomas. They called a timeout. I think they had 3rd and 5 from the 10-yard line. And, he suggested this route called a Texas route, which he basically said is kind of an out and in. It kind of isolated him against the linebacker. Clayton Scott's our former press player of the year and just a fantastic leader on the high school football field. And he was able to get open, and E.J. Nichols hit him, and Millville wins. And as my favorite quote in the story today in the paper and on PressOfAC.com from Dennis Thomas, he goes, "I'm not going to listen to everything he says, but he was right tonight."
Kid's like, "Yeah, Coach, I've scored the last 6 times in Madden on this play. Let's run it."
Yeah, I mean, it was just a suggestion. And also he talked about, he showed his leadership skills throughout that drive. At the start of the drive, Millville's on its own 8-yard line. There's 4 minutes and 25 seconds left, and they're down 4 points. And Clayton Scott said the linemen and stuff were looking at him kind of, with a crazy, quizzical look on their faces. And he said, look at the scoreboard. Game's not over yet. We got 4 minutes. We got a lot going on. Trust me. So as I wrote today, Clayton Scott had the answers for Millville last night, and really, a great game by the defending South Jersey Group 5 champions.
Yeah, you mentioned senior leadership, Mike, and you're seeing that a lot in some of these teams, especially a team like Ocean City, where you have a guy like Harry Feifel come in and quarterback. He's trying to replace a guy in Andrew Donahue, who's at the College of New Jersey now, and that's not an easy task. A guy who set records there as a 4-year starting quarterback, but Harry's really taken this team on his shoulders and said, "Hey, I'm going to be the guy that's going to lead you guys," and they're believing so far. I mean, I know they've only played 1 game, but they got a big test today out at Cedar Creek. What do you expect out of that game? That's going to be a real interesting matchup.
Yeah, I'm headed out to that game today. I'll be leaving in a little bit for Egg Harbor City to see that game today. And I'm really interested to see it. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's a very intriguing game. You look at Ocean City, very good season last year. They returned a lot of players. I think they returned 14 starters from that team, but they lost the quarterback, Donahue. So maybe there's a little bit of a tendency to underrate them in the preseason They come out. I think Feifel, great athlete, great lacrosse player, runs for 2 touchdowns in their opening win over Oak Crest 2 weeks ago. Now they're going to Cedar Creek for a division game. I think it's interesting. I think we'll find out a lot about Ocean City today, and I think we'll find out about Cedar Creek too. I mean, they opened with a win over Absegami. Then they battled Delsey. They lose on the field, but get a forfeit victory, so they're 2-0. I think it's an interesting game for both teams today.
I wonder, Mike, how Cedar Creek feels about that. I mean, yeah, it's great to be 2-0, but you don't want to kind of be handed a freebie like that, and from basically a technicality. So I wonder how they feel about picking up that win, and I'm sure they're going to be out there to prove today, like, hey, we're still Cedar Creek, and a team like Ocean City is not going to come into our house and beat us. So I would assume that kind of be the attitude of the Pirates today.
Yeah, well, I texted back and forth with Tim Watson on, I think it was Thursday when the forfeit came out, and he basically said, right now, he said that they, Cedar Creek learned from the defeat. Delsey's a great program. Cedar Creek's a young team. Louis Barrios is impressed, but he's a sophomore at quarterback. Malachi Melton has impressed at running back and defensive back, but he's a sophomore. They got a lot of young guys in key spots. He said, they learned from the loss. I mean, they were down big at halftime. They rallied back, lost 28-20. But he said they were really kind of putting it out of their minds and just focusing on Ocean City. He said, I'm sure they're going to appreciate it down the road when they get those power points. It's going to help them in the South Jersey Group 2 playoff race. There's no denying that. But, Tim's basic thing was, okay, we learned from the Delsey game, and now we're on to Ocean City, and we'll worry about the forfeit down the road when it comes into play with PowerPoints, and it's obviously a boost for Cedar Creek.
Talk with Mike McGarry of the Press of Atlantic City. And, Mike, I know last week's game, St. Joe at Holy Spirit, a lot of those Spirit guys, when the game kind of got out of hand for them, they were, on the sideline, hey, we're going to see you in the playoffs, that kind of thing. And that's obviously a thing that high school boys will say. They know they're going to lose that game, and, hey, we're going to get you down the road type of thing. But I don't know if anybody wants any part of St. Joe right now, the way they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, they go into Absegami last night and really control the football game. And I think, what stands out about St. Joe, and after seeing a couple of games now, about 3 weeks into the season, I've seen a lot of teams. The St. Joe offensive line, Wisdom Quashie, Sean Morris, Deshaun Birch, Brad Lomax. That offensive line up front is just dominant. And they dominated the second half against Holy Spirit. And though I wasn't at the game, I assume that St. Joe scored 40-something points last night, that the offensive line had a good night. And really what kind of sets St. Joe apart from the other teams that I've seen is the play of that offensive line. I mean, they are just a dominant football team in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, you couldn't have said it any better. There's some big dudes up there, and when you get a bunch of big dudes with a mean streak in them, that's not something you want to see as a defender. You're looking at these dudes, and a lot of them are 250 plus, and they're coming at you, pulling guards and that kind of thing. And if you're a 175-pound defensive back, you're like, this is not going to go good for me.
Yeah, they're big guys, they're athletic guys, they're well coached, and it just. Any football coach will tell you it kind of starts up front, and sometimes, you look at that coach, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time a coach told me it started up front, I'd be able to retire, basically, over the years that I've done it. You kind of roll your eyes and, okay, coach. But it really is true with St. Joe. That offensive line is just dominating. And it's not only on the offensive line side of the ball, it's the defensive side of the ball also with the defensive line. I mean, Sincere Tapp, a defensive end. The St. Joe defensive line really took control of the game against Holy Spirit in the second half, especially Sincere Tapp. And from what I understand, St. Joe's been able to do that all season long, including in some preseason scrimmages against some really good football teams. So, it starts up front, and St. Joe with dominant offensive and defensive lines. Like I wrote last week, the Wildcats, they were 7-4. They lost to Mater Dei. Some people wondered, which way is the program going to go? Are they still going to be one of those premier small school non-public powers in the state of New Jersey? And so far, 3 games into the season, the answer is without a doubt, yes.
Yeah, it's funny, Mike, you mentioned Sincere, and I remember a game, I think it was 2 years ago in the playoffs when they were playing Holy Spirit, and I was out there doing some color analysis for the radio station, and, man, I was thinking to myself, number 8 is just unblockable right now. I look down at the roster. I'm like, this kid's a sophomore. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, and he's been that way ever since. 2 sacks last Friday night. Batted down pass, really great performance by him, and good senior leadership from him too, as well as Quasan Townsville at fullback for St. Joe. So not only do they have the dominant offensive defensive lines, but they also have tremendous senior leadership in those two kids. And as we went back to you go back to Clayton Scott and Millville. And one of your original questions, I mean, senior leadership on a high school football team is one of your most important ingredients for success.
And Mike, how about Pleasantville Greyhounds? Man, they're 2-0 for the first time in 14 years, and a lot of great things going on just in that school in particular, all throughout the athletic department. You saw the girls soccer team snapped a 61-game losing streak, so they're kind of gaining some confidence. Volleyball team had a great year last year. And boys soccer's off to a good start, so it's nice to see that school really kind of reinventing itself as an athletic program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always have, for all these years, the Pleasantville High School has always been the closest high school to the Press of Atlantic City office building down there on West Washington Avenue in Pleasantville. I always have a soft spot in my heart for the Greyhounds, and again, I've said it here before. A million times. Chris Sacco is doing just a great job. It's interesting as I did a little research and saw they were going to be 2-0 for the first time since 2003. I guess it is 14 years. You go back to 2003, and the teams they beat to start 2-0 that season were Holy Spirit and St. Augustine. And you look at that and you just say, wow, how times have changed. But Pleasantville fighting its way back to the forefront. Impressive win. Muhammad Torre, legitimate player at linebacker. LaQuay Athill, legitimate player at quarterback. And then they got a big game next week. They're 2-0, and they're going to a 2-0 Shalleck. Big game for Pleasantville, probably one of the bigger regular season games they've had in a couple of years, and exciting times for the Greyhounds.
Yeah, Mike, it was funny. I was listening to Coach Sacco talk with Tom Williams after the game here on Friday Night Live on ESPN Radio, and they were asking him how old was he in 2003. He said I graduated high school, and he said in 2002 season they lost in the playoffs to Pleasantville, and that still kind of burned him up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the score that game that might have been a 3-0 or a 6-3 game. So it's not like you get used to Pleasantville. 14 years is a long time. You get used to a team, a program kind of spinning its wheels in the mud a little bit. But Pleasantville has been. It's not like Pleasantville wasn't successful. It wasn't like they had some very good teams. 14 years ago is a long time ago, but it's not that long ago. So, Chris Sacco's gone in there with a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and has managed to sort of turn that program around. And, it's a benefit to the Cape Atlantic League schools joining the West Jersey Football League, and Pleasantville being able to play schools that they are, schools who have similar enrollment and things like that. So, winners all around there. And like I said, a big game next week, 2-0 Pleasantville going to a 2-0 Shalleck. Be one of the bigger games in South Jersey next week.
Mike, real quick before we let you go, what do you make of Atlantic City? They had a great comeback win at Bridgeton last night, 27-24. Is this a team that can be a true playoff contender?
Oh, absolutely. I thought coming into the season that Atlantic City was one of the more intriguing teams out there because of their playmakers, and you saw it again last night. Nazim Derry. I mean, he does everything. He's quarterback. He's wide receiver. He's defensive back. He's catching touchdown passes.
He's selling T-shirts at halftime. He's doing the 50-50.
Exactly. He's at the snack bar at halftime. Selling hot dogs. Nasir Morgan. The 6'4" Morgan, one of the better receivers in South Jersey. And Mike Costabile at quarterback has really come over, transferred from Holy Spirit, and is really kind of giving them some stability and some leadership, and he's been able to make some big plays on the field. So I like this Atlantic City team. Big sort of character-building win last night, coming from behind to beat Bridgeton. And, you look at it, I mean, they're 2-1. The loss to St. Augustine, they kind of shot themselves in the foot. They turned the ball over 3 straight possessions in the first quarter, gave the Hermits short field. We're down 21-0, and the game was over, 6-7 minutes into the game. So I like this Atlantic City team. I like what they're doing. I think they're on a bye this week, but they're 2-1 and definitely a team to look for as a South Jersey Group 5 playoff contender.
Mike, great stuff as always. We'll see you out there at Cedar Creek later this afternoon.
All right, always a pleasure, Sully. We'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Thanks, man. That was Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, and